I'm Ingrid Brostrom. I work at the UC Merced Community and Labor Center. I am the program director for climate and the rural economy. And my background is as an environmental justice attorney in Kern County. So I come into the labor world with a background on environmental law. So it's a really kind of a cool intersection, especially as we are trying to bring together important social justice issues, including good jobs and including a safe place to live. So that's really the intersection that I'm interested in. And community benefit agreements is one way that we can do that. Okay, so really the impetus for a community benefit agreement, typically when there's a proposed development coming into a community. And in the traditional kind of community development or in development world, you have the city or the county or whoever the local land use jurisdiction is. They have an obligation to come up with an agreement and a permit for the developer. And in the meantime, they're hearing from a lot of constituents with lots of things that they want to the local municipality to consider. So this could be affordable housing groups, neighborhood groups, environmental groups, unions, other CBOs. So they all have different interests, things that they would like to see the city consider as part of this decision the city has to make. So really the city is negotiating all of that feedback, but they're really working with the developer. When you have a CBA, you can kind of break down those barriers. So a community benefit agreement, I'll go back in a second, but just at its very basic, a community benefit agreement is a contract. Not a union contract, just like a plain old contract, where you have two, you have parties, each of which is giving consideration. So each of which is giving up something in exchange for something. So it's an exchange. And so in a community benefit agreement, this is a legally binding document, it's a contract, between developers and some subset of community labor CBOs on the other hand, and they're stipulating the benefits a developer agrees to fund or furnish on the one hand, and generally on the other, you're having the community labor organizations either agree to support the project or not oppose it. So that's kind of the two sides of the coin. So going back to here, generally you would like to see just one CBA. I mean, you don't have to, but generally it's good to kind of have the groups that are interested or stakeholders in the project working directly with the developer. So that line of communication is direct. You can also have the local jurisdiction involved. So you can have a trilateral agreement. It can either be incorporated into the CBA as part of that development agreement.
You flash your hand in front of it.
Oh, okay. And so you can either have just the two parties, or you can actually have still this triangle with each party and the local municipality playing a role in helping with enforcement and helping incentivize this agreement to happen. So there's lots of terms used. We covered a couple of them. So I'm not going to go through this in depth, but in general, a community benefit agreement, the things that really make it a community benefit agreement is that it's an enforceable, legally binding contract for all parties. There's a couple of other things. You might have heard of a good neighbor agreement. That generally you see those with existing companies. It doesn't have to happen just when the development is happening, but it's still a negotiated agreement between an existing company generally and community groups to reduce harm and address community needs. A good neighbor agreement, I have seen both contracts, enforceable contracts, but also non-enforceable agreements. A community benefit plan, I don't know how much we're going to be talking about these in the future, but they were they were recently required by the Department of Energy as part of their grants. And these were non-legally binding agreements, and they were created by the developers after receiving feedback from different stakeholders outlining what they committed to do as part of their development. We have a project labor agreement and then a community workforce agreement, which we just talked about. So in general, there's pros and cons to community benefit agreements. In terms of why these can be very advantageous is that it is a mechanism to ensure that residents and workers share in the benefits of major developments in their communities. And CBAs can be very tailored. Each community obviously is going to have different priorities, different needs, and community benefit agreements can be very tailored. Unlike a permit, like a land use permit, where there has to be a pretty clear nexus between what the local municipality is requiring from the project and the project. A community benefit agreement doesn't have to relate only to the development. It can actually go well beyond the scope of just the project. It can shift the balance of power in economic development from developers and the local government to also include workers and the general community. And because it's a contract, it can hold developers accountable to their promises. Oftentimes, in these permitting processes or public processes, you hear the developer saying a lot of things that they're going to do, but with an enforceable contract, suddenly they have to commit and follow through on those promises. So what are some of the cons? Well, they're difficult to do well. For one thing, it's not always clear who gets to be at the table. So who's negotiating this agreement, and how do you make sure that everyone is aligned with what's in it? That is very hard to do well, particularly when you have a lot of groups that are interested and might not themselves be aligned on what they want. So in terms of just pitfalls, it can be very difficult to figure out who is making the decisions, who's at the table. We have seen some CBAs that have been co-opted by better resourced and well-connected interests. So it could be somebody that already is close with a developer. And so sometimes people that are at the margins, they have the hardest time being integrated into these processes. Again, this can be a divisive thing. You don't often have complete alignment amongst the community. Whether they want to enter into a CBA, because again, you have to give up your right to oppose the project generally. That's generally what you're giving up. And then even if there's alignment there, what do you want to see out of the CBA? So again, doing this well is difficult and takes a lot of planning and process and time. Generally, I've seen these things take years. And then again, signatories generally, they have to give up their right to oppose a project. This can be hard, particularly if your interests are more around environmental concerns or health or safety. That's a real trade-off for folks to figure out, is this a project that we can live with? And if so, what do we want to see in exchange for us not fighting this project? So I mentioned that there doesn't have to be a clear connection or a nexus to the development. And so this is just, I've been kind of sharing this presentation with community groups. And this is a slide I like to share. I like to have people, kind of use this picture to think creatively. So here we have our luxurious condos. That's the development in this case. And even in this picture, outside of the development, we can see a worker training center that is powered by solar. We see a grocery store up in that corner, the green building, a local grocery store. We see public transit, down here. We see trees, so maybe some urban greening projects, affordable housing. Those houses up here, we have a lake, so maybe preserve some land. So again, it can run the gamut. It's very flexible, as much as the developer is willing to give up. So the types of benefits that can be included in a CBA, again, wide-ranging, but what I really want to stress today is oftentimes, at least in my world that I came from, when you think about a CBA, you're thinking about the community. But oftentimes, also in community benefit agreements, there's a lot of labor provisions that you can include in a CBA. So here's some examples. Money for a community trust fund that provides grants and funds ongoing certain. So this is like a pot of money. Sometimes it's an ongoing pot of money. It's an annual, distribution, or it's a per ton if there's some sort of input coming in. And so this is just generating funds that the community can then figure out how they want to spend, potentially around some parameters. So that's a very, very common one that we see in these. There also can be funding for specific projects that the community needs or wants, and so you can already have that defined in the CBA. Now getting to some of the labor provisions. You can have guarantees to hire a certain number of locals, so you can have local hire. You often see local hire in these. You can also require union. Here, I know we talked about it in the last presentation, commitments to hire workers of color or female workers. This is a private developer, not the government. So those restrictions may not apply. Now, if you do get your municipality included, maybe you'll have some problems there. But in general, you can have some more targeted hires. Funding for jobs, technical programs. You can do that. Job training centers. Guarantees to pay workers a living wage or establish job training programs. Funds for affordable housing or funds for youth programs, mental health, substance abuse, all kinds of community programs. So you can see this is meant to show that there's a wide range of things that can get included in a CBA, and it, again, can be very tailored to the community. And ideally, what I would like to see is that there be labor provisions just routinely included in these. So what makes an effective CBA? One, that the community interests are well represented. Again, trying to make sure that who's at the table is inclusive, and that basically capturing those at the furthest ends of the margin. The process is transparent, inclusive, and accessible. There are concrete, meaningful benefits that deliver what the community actually needs, and that there's clear enforcement mechanisms. So everything is spelled out very clearly in this contract, including, in the long term. And what happens if it's not complied with. So, unlike a PLA, how you get a CBA is much less defined. Because if you just go with your hand out to a developer and say, we want you to give us a whole lot of extra money, they're probably not going to agree to that. So, trying to figure out, what is in the developer's best interest. Why would they want to come to the table? What is your position of power? And so there's different types of leverage that the community should figure out before it engages in this process. Some of the biggest reasons why I have seen developers come to the table is a fear of litigation. Just the added risk, the added time frame, the added uncertainty of litigation. California Environmental Quality Act, of course, in California, there's a lot of litigation around that, and that's definitely something that developers would like to avoid if possible. NEPA, that's the federal ancillary to CEQA for federal projects, or where there's a federal nexus. There's also other environmental and civil rights laws. There's also just the permitting processes themselves. Is the local jurisdiction amenable? Do they have similar concerns as the community? Are they going to be responsive to the community or labor concerns so that they might hold up the project or deny a permit? So certainly there's some permitting processes, both at the local jurisdiction as well as other permits that might be needed by the development. Grants and subsidies, there was, as I just mentioned, the Department of Energy was requiring community benefit plans and encouraging CBAs as part of their programs and subsidies. I don't know how much that is the case anymore. Things are changing over there very drastically. So, but aside from that, if they are receiving public funds, there still may be ways of ensuring that, if you're receiving public funds, providing a public good and working with the community. So my absolute closing thought, and this is really what I wanted to take away, is I really do see CBAs as a really important tool to bring community groups together with labor organizations and unions and break out of that silo, because having good wages, having local jobs, having workplace health and safety, those are all important not only for the workers, but it's also important for the local economy, and it's really important for the people that live there. And so I think there has been not enough opportunities for us to come together and really look for the win-win when these projects are getting developed, that they're safe for the community and protective of the environment and good for workers. And so that is my real big hope, is that when a community group is working on a CBA, they know who to go to. Which unions do we want to bring in? What labor organizations? Because we want them at the table, and vice versa. If there is maybe not so much as a PLA, but if there are CBAs where union is working, maybe we can throw in some other benefits to the broader community so that we can really find those win-wins, and more importantly, that we get used to working together more, because that really is my biggest hope. Right. Thank you.